everybody, Lee here. Thank you for watching and or listening to this week's episode of Leading with Lee. I'm super excited that you are here with me today to talk about life, leadership, and legacy. On this week's episode, I have a very, very, very special guest. But before I introduce her, if you have not done it yet, go and subscribe to Leading with Lee on YouTube and all podcasting platforms. And so today I have the honor of having Annielle Timmons on. How you doing, Annielle?
Hi, I'm wonderful. How are you?
Good. Well, first of all, thank you for coming on. I'm going to allow you to kind of share a little bit about yourself, but just kind of share about your background and who you are with people.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity. So my name is Annielle Timmons. Annielle with an A. I have to say that. Last name is Timmons. So you can follow me at I am Annielle. And so I have a podcast. I am a former therapist, actually. I have a really great story to share with you guys about that. I have my background in mental health. So I have my master's in clinical social work. I did therapy for several years. And now God has called me to speaking, preaching, and I'm also in seminary school. And I also do personal development coaching.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, that's dope. I mean, you're out here doing some things that you want to do, and that diversity of experience is something that people are having to learn to do at this point, especially to survive economically, right? So you kind of touched on, okay, have a background in therapy, have a background in just mental health space, and then you're coaching and you're also in ministry. How did you get to that place that like this is your story and all these unique things are you?
Thank you. That's an amazing question. I'm going to say one word, God,
Yeah.
because I came from a background of, I had childhood trauma. Thank God I overcame it. God really took me through this long healing process. And I basically told God, like, hey, God, you get me through this. I will pour back into other people and bless other people. And so that's what really led me to therapy. Is I went through childhood trauma. And when I finally healed and I did the work, I then wanted to take that or my healing and pour back into other people and help them on their healing journey as well. And the preaching and the podcasting and going into ministry was again God, because I didn't necessarily think I was called to be a pastor. I grew up, I don't know if you're familiar with the denomination of Church of Christ, but
Yes.
okay. So my grandfather is a minister of the Church of Christ. So they have these very strict
Uh-huh. Oh, I
perspectives on
know.
women. Okay.
Oh, I
You
know.
guys,
I know. You don't have to explain to me.
okay. Okay. So I kind of grew up, hearing that a lot about like women cannot be in leadership roles. They cannot be in the church as pastors. So I never really saw myself as being that. Even when people somewhat kind of refer to me as kind of going in that route, I kind of like cringe a little bit, because I just like, I don't know. I'm getting used to the word. I'm getting used to kind of like the preaching, element of it, so to speak. But I started my podcast last year. And I shared on my first episode about my childhood trauma and how I went through this season of being rejected, and something humiliating happened in high school. And not only was I rejected by the school, but I also was rejected by my family. And I just fell into this really deep depression. I was suicidal. Had anxiety.
Yeah.
And I just wept on my floor and cried out to God and pray like, God, if you get me through this, God, I'll worship you. God, just get me through this, fast forward my life. And so after all of that, and here I am. So last year I shared that story, the details of that story, with my Uncle Freddie, who was my spiritual soundboard. And right before he passed away, I was sharing with him about how I'm going to share that on a podcast. And so it was about a month and a half before he passed away, but he heard the story. He wept with me. He cried. He just said how he was shocked that I even went through all that. He had no clue I had that story hidden inside of me. And he basically shared that God has a calling on my life, how he wants me to be ready for the calling, and how he wants me to go to seminary school. And so that's how I got into seminary school. It was right before he passed away. He hooked me up with one of his old friends, who actually kind of became my mentor.
Yeah, it's great.
So yeah, it's really divine.
That's great. It's something that you said that was, I think, was extremely key. Is that our stories, especially our childhood stories, has a way of shaping who we are or shaping our perspective about the world. And I mean, even though you chose to go to ministry, that can apply to anybody. Like overcoming the realities of your story is something that you literally have to deal with. And you having a history with therapy and a history with mental health, what are some of those conversations that you would have with not only clients or just individuals in general about the importance of addressing your story as a child? Because I think a lot of people are still there. Like
Yeah.
they're growing in age, but they are still dealing with the fact that something happened to them at 7 or 8 or 9 years old. What are those conversations like for you?
I think it's unique to each individual, right?
Right.
Because I can tell you're probably not the most not to say you're not sensitive, but I can say something to you that I can't say to Sally, or I can't say to Bobby, or I can't say
Yes.
to Keisha. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
So I you have to approach every person differently based on where they're at, right?
Right.
um I can be sensitive, but I also have thick skin because my mom has thick skin. So I'm someone that's, if I need to work on something, let me know, because I'm always trying to grow and change.
Yeah.
So for as far as the mental health and having the conversation of where to start and examining childhood roots, I would just kind of go from the presenting issue. So whatever, like my clients, even in personal development coaching, what is it that you're currently going through, right? Like, let's just say, for example, you were to share something with me, like, when I get mad, like I just snap, like I go to 0 to 100. I can't control myself. I mean, the words come out of my mouth. I mean, I'm cursing, I'm yelling, and then before I know it, I snap back to reality, and my girlfriend is crying.
I'm still being changed. You know.
And the funny part is that was me. I always sure that God took me from ratchet to righteous, because
Ah, that's real.
I'm
That's
just
real.
saying it was a journey. So, I get that. I was a little hothead back in the day. So let's just say like that was the case, right? Like you had a problem with your temper. I would then ask you, okay, well, tell me a little bit about how did you see anger being handled when you were growing up?
Yes.
And so from there, you generally might say something like, oh, well, mom was a domineering, or you saw someone getting angry. Or it could be the quite opposite. Like it could be that maybe mom wasn't taking up for herself or defending herself, and dad was angry, and it made you inside kind of react
Right.
to dad. Or so we'll kind of like just kind of examining how your current reality can have some ties to your childhood.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's powerful because I think you're hitting at something that we all have to realize that we have to navigate. One thing I always talk about is, and I said this before we got started, but I do believe that everybody has a capacity and level of leadership. That's everybody.
Yeah.
But not dealing with our stories has a way of causing us to be stuck when we could be more effective in our lives because we haven't addressed a lot of issues. And I think you're getting at something, Annielle, that like a lot of people are stuck in and are trying to figure that out. You know, um, kind of staying in that vein, you kind of touched on family. Family is a loaded subject for all of us. How do you think that family dynamic plays a role in a person's personal development? Because you probably have clients as you're talking to them about these things. Like, how are you seeing that play out in conversations with your clients?
Okay, let me just clarify. You mean as far as like their immediate family now, or more so their family that was within their household growing up?
But well, really growing up, but you can talk
Okay.
about both because you know they're both affected by each other. How you grew up obviously impacts the way you see the world currently. So start with the
The upbringing.
upbringing.
Yeah, so just kind of asking them what they see growing up. How do they kind of getting them to draw parallels between their current reality and their childhood, right?
Yeah.
So it could be the anger, it could be how conflict is resolved, right? Because I know, growing up for myself, I didn't really see people talk through anything. You know, I didn't see anybody sitting down at the table and saying, you know
Girl,
what?
listen.
you know? So, a lot of people don't see healthy conflict resolution. So I've seen, even as I'm becoming more healthy and whole, that even like as an adult, people assume that a disagreement is going to turn into this full out argument, debate,
Right.
and
Right.
you're not going to be friends anymore. I remember like I was having this discussion, I was on a date or something, and I forgot, dude said something. And I just disagreed with him. It wasn't like a rah, rah, rah. I was just like, oh, tell me a little bit more about that, because I don't necessarily agree with that, but tell me a little bit more. And he was just like, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to. And I'm like, I'm not going to argue. I just want to know, So it's, what'd you say?
I said, oh, wow.
So a lot of people do that. A lot of people, or they suppress things because they think if they discuss it, right, if they bring it to the surface, that it's going to turn into this argument, or they're going to assume that other person is going to leave them, or they're just going to have this heated, discussion. And it goes back, it all has childhood roots, right? Like if we saw, when daddy got upset with mom and they could never talk and it always turned into this screaming match, even the thought of a disagreement can provoke anxiety, your heart can start beating fast, and it all has these childhood roots.
Yeah, I think that's good. You were talking about how that person acted on the date. Yeah, there's a lot of childhood roots, but it brought up an interesting thought in my head that like that's a problem within our culture at this moment. Like people don't know, or people are not mature enough to, or let me rephrase that. People are not emotionally mature enough to hear someone out when they're talking about an issue that they don't agree with. And we're seeing that happen over and over and over again. I mean, you can see it in the political discourse. You can see it in just the culture at large. Like the way people talk to people on social media. Oh my goodness. I'm like, you came for this person's whole throat. You don't even know them.
Right.
Like, I don't understand. How did you start talking about their kids? They just asked a question, but the toxicity I think plays a role in that, and I think you're getting at that issue of those root issues that we don't address and we don't deal with. I think that's so good. Kind of moving along, you talked about how all of these things kind of played a role in your own development, your own growth, in your own personal leadership, in your own career. You took all that experience, all that life, and said, you know what? I'm going to podcast. I'm going to put my business out there.
That's how I sound.
No, but I'm just saying, I'm just going to tell the world, what's going on with me. Like, there has to be some motivation, because I know the motivation for me with starting Leland League. But what were some of your motivations to really use your story as a vehicle to impact and empower people?
Like I mentioned, I think when you've hit rock bottom and you've experienced so much hurt, so much pain, so much sadness, so much grief, so much loss, rejection, anxiety, guilt, shame, and you finally come out of it, God blesses you to come out of it. And you come out of it not even looking like what you've been through. Like, I finally understand what the saints have been saying for all these years, that you don't look like what you've been through.
Uh-huh.
So when
I'm trying to be churchy. I'm trying not to be real churchy right now. I'm sorry.
I try not to be like that on my podcast, but it just comes out, But I just came out of it. And when I came out of it, I just felt so emotional, and I still get emotional when I worship God, because I look at statistics and just kind of like remembering how low I was and how broken I was. and just how God pulled me out of that. And I mean, did like a 180. It wasn't overnight now, it was a lot of work, but did a 180 on my life. You want to give back, right? Like you
Right.
want other people to know that healing is possible with God. God can do amazing things.
Yeah.
Even when you were in your mother's womb, he knew you were going to go through everything you went through. He has a purpose for it, because I wouldn't have been effective as a therapist. I wouldn't have been effective as a mentor. I wouldn't have been
Exactly.
effective as a group facilitator,
Right.
podcaster, preacher, if you want to call it, speaker. I wouldn't have been as effective if I had not went through what I went through. And so I think that's very, very important, is when we overcome something or when we learn something, that we then turn around and pull somebody else up, or we help or bless someone else so that they know that there's hope.
Yeah, and I think that's great. I think that's great. You I think our stories are not just about us, right? And you're proof positive that you realize that your story was just not about you. So you use it as a platform to impact people. So I hope when people listen to this and people watch this, they'll realize that like all the stuff that we have experienced in our lives actually is fodder for our own success. Like
Yeah.
they're just lessons. They're foundational building blocks. What are you about to say?
I was just going to say really quick, and something else though, you guys, when you share your story and you finally get it out, it's so liberating, right? Because for so
Yes.
long, people have told me, like I remember I had, when I went through that childhood thing. If you haven't listened to my podcast, you guys got to go listen to the first episode of last season. But when I shared all of that, it's liberating. Every time I share someone a piece of that pain, I go down deep to get that pain out for somebody. And I'm intending to do that as an antidote. That I'm giving this to you to help you heal. This is your healing. And I'm pulling down a vulnerable part of myself to give it to you. That is real. So when
Yeah.
you, like the Bible says, when you overcome by the blood of the Lamb and a word of your testimony.
Yeah.
So you're overcoming when you share that and you get it off your chest. You don't let the enemy trick you and make you think that your story don't matter and make you hide behind that shame of what you went through. Someone else's healing is contingent upon you expressing what you went through or you sharing that with them. So it's liberating too.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Oh my gosh, that's such a great point. Because people spend so much time harboring hurt and don't realize it is becoming an impediment to their progress. And
Yeah.
you're getting at something, Annielle, that's like on the money. So I'm gonna move us along just a little bit more. Your story has become a catalyst that you've used to impact people and influence people and encourage people to make a difference in their lives. How has some of the relationships and friendships played a role in how you do your work? Because you mentioned your uncle, God rest his soul, played instrumental role in you being where you are now with school. Like, how has that kind of played a role in your life lately?
Yeah, God is so amazing because every time you go to a new level, you don't always keep the same friends. And oftentimes you have to allow God to bring seasonal people in your life, to remove people, to bring lifelong friendships, to just be open to accept whatever the Lord has in store. So I actually went through a season where I felt like I had lost all my high school friends. Like we just fell out of touch and
Yeah.
people did their own thing. We were living two different lives. And so I didn't really have a lot of my high school friends. So I went through a season where it was like I had a few small amount of friends and we didn't talk all the time. And so I remember my Uncle Freddie was like, well, and yeah, when God does send you some friends, you need to know how to love people. You need to know how to love women because women are very unique in relationships. And because of my childhood stuff, I had friendships from high school, but they weren't always the healthiest. We didn't always talk about the healthiest, the what is it, wholesome things. So I was like, okay,
It's
well, let me
okay.
look.
You can talk about
Okay.
whatever you want to talk about.
No, it's
Okay.
all but yeah, so I just when I went through that season of just kind of like finding my friends, I guess. I started studying relationships, studying what it means to be a woman in a friendship and having women friends and what we need as women. And I read a book called I think it's called the Friendships of Women by Dee Bernstein,
Hmm.
in which she was just sharing about how important women need, how the different fundamentals of women relationships, what we need, and how like we have to have intimacy, we have to have vulnerability, we have to have transparency, how we have to be very selective with what we say and how we say it to one another. And all of those things that I learned, I just like was like, okay, God, I'm hoarding all of this for when you bring some dope women. And here I am in 2021 with these amazing friends. God is amazing. And I have about 5 solid women on my, like in my circle that are just phenomenal. So I would say it's been very instrumental, very helpful. If ever I'm struggling, or even like with a guy if I'm dating and I'm apprehensive about it, a particular guy, I'll call him and be like, girl, X, Y, and Z, 1, 2, 3, girl, this is what he said. This is what this is my concerns. And they will like listen, will joke, or they'll tell me, okay, like I think that's a good guy. Some of them even will like let kind of bring it back to context of the word of God. But I've just been so blessed to kind of just have their guidance. And I think that's so important.
Yeah, that's good. Solid friendships are so necessary. I mean, I've experienced that with my girlfriend. Her friends lit me up. They lit me. Oh my gosh, when I mean they lit me up, I'm like, I don't know y'all. Like,
They
why?
drilled you.
Oh Lord, I mean, they just like.
Did you pass? I mean, it sounds like you passed.
Right.
Get
Praise
over your
God.
teeth.
But 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 what I realized in that moment, I was like, that's great, because it lets me know a lot about her, and it also lets me know a lot about you, Annielle. That like you realize that these women, these people that are in my life, they have the right to say no to me. They have the right to say, "Nah, you probably don't need to make that move." They have the right to interject in big moments in my life, so that I don't make decisions that are detrimental to me. And
Good.
I'm getting to this place in my life too where I realize like I'm not in this frame of, there's plenty of songs that are out here to say no new friends. I'm not on that, but I do recognize that we have to categorize friendships and understand the role that friendship plays in our lives, right? Um, I I'm going to ask you more questions, but I feel like I need to mention this while we're talking about it. One of the things that I've thought a lot about, even in friendships, is understanding the intent of friendships. I want to get your thoughts about that in a moment. But one of the things that comes to my mind all the time is if we only attract what we really need, right? Like if you're putting out, if you're saying, hey, I need some just people that just love me for me. Like you have to create foster an environment that brings that, right? If I need some friends that's going to help me move forward in my career, I need to be fostering an environment that helps it. Like, what are your thoughts about that? How do we create an environment to attract the type of people we want to see ourselves advance, or will help us advance rather?
I think it's almost exactly kind of like what you just said is it's you recognizing what your needs are.
Yeah.
And not only what your needs are, but what you can give and what you can offer. Because a friendship should be a two-way street. It should not just
That's
be,
real.
you know what I'm
That's
saying?
real.
It should not just be one person doing this large outpour and the other person getting filled up and then the other person just not getting their needs met. I mean, it could very much be that, maybe God just called it to be that way in that season. Maybe sounds more like a mentorship. I don't know.
Right.
But
Right.
I think I think a person should look within themselves and know what you want and know what you need to feel fulfilled in a friendship. For me, I value intimacy. I value transparency. I value growth, closeness. So growth, closeness, intimacy, transparency, encouragement. Those things matter to me. My relationship with God matters to me. So I create an environment that I'm vulnerable, right? So,
Right.
I make sure I'm vulnerable. I express myself. I do it in love. I speak encouraging words. I make it evident who I stand for, which is God. And, when you're being your authentic self, you have there's no other way to attract someone else besides attracting the people that are drawn to you and meant to
Right.
come into your circle. So you'll find them. Of course, be selective, because I read a quote that said, don't get confused with what you're offered with what you're worth, because sometimes people can show up and they just showing up because they're attracted to your anointing.
Wait. Run that back. Run that back. Say that again.
Don't confuse what you're worth with what you're offered.
Wow.
So just because people are showing up, right? Just because people are
Wow.
presenting themselves to you doesn't mean that you got to give them your time. Some people they're attracted to your anointing. They're just attracted
Wow.
to you as a person. But that doesn't mean that they're healthy for you to be around and be friends with or in a relationship with.
Wow. That's loaded. That's heavy. And I think that puts demands on people to remember their value. I think one thing I realized, Annielle, that I struggle with a lot of my life, and I think in the last few years I've gotten this more and more through therapy, through being in a men's group, through actually talking to my friends, not doing how we do with our friends. We're like, oh yeah, I'm good. But actually being like, hey, can I talk to you about this specific thing? I, I, I realized that, like, especially in the last few years, that the more, going back to something you talked about earlier, the more I talk about the stuff that's going on with me, the more healing that I can experience, the more freedom I can experience, the more I value myself. And I start
Mm,
putting parameters around the way people talk to me, right?
mm,
And kind of talk about that because I want you to talk a little bit more about worth, because that seems to be something that people are struggling with right now, especially in the middle of this pandemic. People act like the pandemic is not over. It is still going on. People have still lost jobs. People have still not found jobs. People are trying to step out in some ways and start businesses or pursue entrepreneurship. Like, kind of talk about that worth piece a little bit more for me. What
sure.
that really look like in some ways?
Yeah, like you said, it looks just exactly like what you said, drawing boundaries. Like once you begin to know yourself, right? I always say like kind of like the word says, right? Love the Lord your God, and then love your neighbor as yourself, right? So we're called to love God first and then love our neighbor as ourselves. So we can only love our neighbor as ourselves and love our neighbor properly when we love ourselves.
Yeah.
So if you don't love yourself, and if you don't really, value yourself or think you are worthwhile, then you're gonna attract people who are not gonna be
Mm-hmm.
the healthiest, and they're probably not gonna think you're worthwhile either, because they probably don't think they're worthwhile.
That's right.
So
Right.
yeah. So it is knowing yourself, loving God, knowing God, loving God, and then knowing yourself, loving the parts of yourself, that are unique to you. Because I think that's very important to self-esteem, is knowing your strengths, know what you're good at, being able to talk about what you're good at and your natural gifts. Because a lot of times I hear people that they don't want to talk about themselves. And I'm like, majority of your life is gonna come from you being able to talk about yourself and you
Yeah.
being able to know what you're good at.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know what you're good at, it sounds like a little bit low self-esteem, and it's humility that can come with that, right? Because you don't want to be arrogant, but you can be confident to know, okay, well, I'm good at this, right? Like you're good at talking to people. You're confident in yourself. I can see that by your body language, how you engage. You're working on yourself. You don't feel uncomfortable with self-disclosure. You're confident in the person that you are and who you became, right? And so people have to own what it is they're good at, and then they also have to own what it is that they're not good at.
Right.
And just know as much as you can about who you are and being willing to work on those things. And then also, if a person is struggling with worth and self-worth, then that's a self-esteem issue. And it can go back to childhood, right?
Yeah.
I always share too, like your identity, of course, is found in Christ. So first and foremost, I don't know if you have a Christian podcast, right? These are
Not
most
necessarily.
Christians.
Not
Okay.
necessarily. But listen, this we're talking about life, leadership, and legacy. And I don't particularly prescribe to telling people when they come on, I ask them to come on, to hide who they are. This is who
Okay.
you are. I need you to tell them, tell the people, y'all don't hear me in the back. Tell somebody. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
All the
Hey.
Pentecostal in me came out just
Yes. See, I'm thankful too because in the therapy realm we cannot do all this Jesus talk, but I love talking about God. It's a part of my healing, and so like you said, I can't get away from it. So nonetheless, get to know God, find your identity in God. If you don't know Jesus, try him. He's good. He's all right. Okay. Yep. No, get to know God. Like I said, try Jesus. He's amazing. He's just done wonders in my life. That's one reason to I'm so thankful that I get to do my own coaching thing and even in group facilitating, because I can share with people like, hey, this worked for me. And I feel like Jesus brings understanding to human suffering. Like oftentimes when I was preaching that Western psychology view for so many years, there was no hope. Like I know there was hope, but these people want to know why they're suffering. They want to know that their life it means something, right? That everything that they've been through has meaning and purpose and value. And in that Western psychology positive thinking model is very limiting. And even in trauma, learning about trauma, it'll make you depressed. But I digress. But know God, then get to know yourself. If you're struggling with worth, look up self-esteem. I have a self-esteem e-course that you can take, and I think it's like $20 right now. So take that self-esteem
self-promote,
e-course.
Annielle.
No, I'm being
Self-promote.
you listen, that helped me. Everything I put in that e-course really transformed my self-esteem, y'all. My self-esteem was in the tanks. If I put up some of my old pictures from 10 years ago, y'all would see how low my self-esteem was.
Yeah.
So everything that I promote is something that I have used in my own life. I don't just sell y'all no crap. I have done the work myself personally. I have the clinical experience, I have the education, and I'm giving it to you guys for $20. Okay. So get to know yourself, learn self-esteem. My mentor told me when I had low self-esteem, you need to look into self-esteem because out of self-esteem is going to shape every other area of your life. So if you're struggling with worth, that probably has to do with self-esteem.
Okay, so great answer, Annielle. I think that was so good. So moving along, give us some advice about seeking connection because I think a lot of people right now are having a moment where they're trying to figure out, wait, can I, how do I deal with the trauma and the pain that I feel right now about stuff that's going on in my life? Like, people are struggling. Talk to us a little bit about seeking connection and what does that look like for people, especially now in this mess we call quarantine. Uh, how can people do that, and how can people find the right type of relationships in their lives?
Sure. So again, I'm coming from my experience, and I have to say that because you know how people are on the internet.
Right, right.
So for me, what did it for me? It was God. It was my relationship with God, and I'm gonna tell you why. As a therapist, as someone who can write a whole book on CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which basically just talks about how your mind dictates your thoughts, or your thoughts dictate your emotions and your behavior. So I'm going to say, like, my relationship with God, because God brings sense to the pain, He brings purpose to the pain. And He promises to heal you and get you through it. It's a daily renewing. It's the daily love for me. It's the grace for me, and His love just softens you up and just helps you like understand life from a different angle and understand that He suffered Himself. And even once you get to a place where God starts healing you, then you then can pour back into other people. And it's a daily thing though, because sometimes even as you heal, right? Like I can give someone all the therapy in the world and they can take all the medication if that's where it leads to, whatever. But if you don't really have anything solid and anchor, then once that wounds gets messed with again or something comes up and you get triggered, you can go downhill. So for me, what keeps me anchored and brings it all together, because I know a lot about the brain. I know how trauma can affect the brain. Trauma can affect the hormones in the brain.
Yeah.
Sometimes medication is necessary. Sometimes therapy is necessary. Sometimes both of them is necessary. But what does it for me is the holistic route, right? Having faith in God, having a relationship with God, knowing that it's a daily walk. It's not just a one-time thing and that's it. No, it's a daily walk. Then, mental health, depending on what you went through, it could be as easy as taking a trauma e-course. Oh, I have that too. Okay.
That's great. That's great.
But trauma healing, mental health, the part is going to be thinking, right? Like knowing that your thoughts do influence your emotions and behaviors, getting your mindset right, doing your self-esteem work. So all of those things, getting your physical health back in alignment, all of those things matter. So whatever it is that you're struggling with, if it's relationships, if it's the spirituality piece, if it's self-esteem, research that area. I always say throw your whole self into your healing. And so if you do that and you throw yourself in your healing, you can hit me up as your personal development coach. You can do it on your own because the Lord is an amazing helper. Whatever it is, just throw yourself in your healing and you will be good.
That's great. That's great. So I have three more questions for you. And my first question as it relates to that, and before I ask you this question, please, y'all, sign up for her e-courses. Like she's given us so much material and so many opportunities to actually develop ourselves in a healthy, get healthy emotions. I think that's what you're really talking about. But just kind of share with us one way you are now paying it forward in your life.
Sure. So right now I am working on a program with a friend. I have a friend who has a friend has 5 group homes, and then he said
Wow.
100 more, and he
Wow.
wants me to do group facilitating, so going to the houses of the young adults and just
That's great.
teaching them about mental health, helping them heal, teaching them coping skills. I'm going to be praying with them because that's part of my ministry. So I'm working on a curriculum to kind of include faith, but also include those uh, psycho therapy techniques. And I'm also on my podcast, Bloom with Purpose. I pour a lot of gems and drop a lot of gems in there. And I also have a blog. And right now I'm studying. I'm really studying the word. I'm in school and I'm just making myself well-rounded. I'm really getting all these practices down so that as I continue to be in these audiences and speak, I have a conference coming up too, that I can just be equipped, y'all. So I can give y'all all of these nuggets, right? So y'all not just getting one side of the mental health, y'all getting all this beautiful things and wisdom God is just pouring into me. So I'm giving back in a lot of different ways. Like I said, right now, you guys can just hit me up on the podcast, follow me. I'm always dropping positive stuff on Instagram, Facebook. And like I told you, I'll be partnering with those group homes soon.
That's great. That's great. So, um, what are you currently reading right now? I know you're studying the word, but what are some other things that you're reading to actually grow and develop personally?
Sure. I'm reading a book called Discipleship by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Have you heard of him? Bonhoeffer?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Yep.
Yes.
It's amazing. Okay, so you read it.
I haven't read it, but I have a lot of friends at ORU who were in the theology department who wrote a lot of Dietrich Bonhoeffer's writings, and he is like we talked about him in one of my courses that I had to take that like everybody has to take, but that that man, my goodness,
Yeah,
I mean,
he's
a
fire.
general, like a general in the faith.
Yeah, he's dope. So I'm reading that, and it's so good. I feel like I'm like letting it marinate. I'll read some and I'll shut it. I'm like, Lord, that's so good. Reading that, and then I'm listening to an Audible called Everybody Always by Bob Goff. So I love that.
Great dude, love Bob Goff.
Yes,
He's so great.
I love it. You're excited. You like him.
He's great. I mean, he's great because he. I know you. This is your time to share.
No, you're
I'll
fine.
say real quick. I admire him so much because, as you probably have read about him, He's an attorney who's out here doing work and engaging in the middle of the Congo with folks who are witch doctors and getting these folks educated and showing them the love of Jesus. Like,
I love it. Wow.
like that's, but goes by what we talked about earlier. That's somebody who's in their purpose. Because it doesn't look, it's not a normal story. It's someone in their purpose. It's someone recognizing this is what they're called to do. I'm setting up.
No, that's good. That is so good. Yeah, I actually didn't know he was that's where he was. I know because I only heard from him through audio.
And he's great. He's great to read. Like all his books are really great. And he's so, if you ever get a chance to, please go just watch him share. He's so like, and I hope when people watch this or listen to they'll realize, like, please go check out Bob Goff. Bob Goff is so fun. Like, he is such an energetic person. He is so like, he's such a kind man. And you can tell he's so kind, you know? But I digress. You were talking. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. So those two are my main things right now. Like I told you, I just got out of one of my semesters, so I was doing a lot of reading, and so we read Bonhoeffer's book Discipleship. So I'm just revisiting it, studying it, and just really soaking up all of it has to offer.
Good. Well, and my last and final question, and then we're gonna let you go because you're a busy woman and you got some e-courses to get people to sign up for. So my last and final question is, what song would you use to describe yourself and why?
What song?
Yes.
Love this question. If I could choose a song to describe myself and why, I would probably choose Travis Green's Made a Way. And I cry almost every time I listen to that song, the extended version of it, just because he shares his story about, how God, when he fell down all these stairs and all these different things that happened to him in his life, and how God really made away from him, even when the doctor said that his wife, the baby wasn't going to make it. And he just basically says how God made a way. And it's powerful. His testimony is all throughout the song. And so you have no choice but to just rejoice, to weep, to feel the emotion, but also kind of to think about how God has made a way in your life. So I would say Made a Way. Like I said, God is amazing, y'all. Like, I've been through the trenches and here I am to tell y'all that God is good and it was worth it. And I don't take anything from my journey, despite how ugly some of it was. So yeah, God is good, y'all. So I would say Made a Way for sure.
Well, Annielle Timmons, I have enjoyed this conversation with you, and I hope that people are inspired to make a difference in the world, are inspired to realize that they have a purpose and they can do something and actually can take control of what you said, dealing with their mental health. Like, if there's anything that you have said this whole time, is that we need to get a relationship with God, deal with our mental health, and really bet on ourselves. Because it's time. It's time. But Annielle, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, Lee. And I just pray that God continues to bless you in all you do. You are a great host. And I just know that he's doing amazing things in your life.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for watching and or listening to this week's episode of Leading with Lee. If you have not done it yet, subscribe today on YouTube and all podcasting platforms. To get more information about me and what I'm doing, email me at scottconsultations@gmail.com or follow me on social media on Twitter and especially Instagram at Lee A. Scott II or Lee A. Scott II. Thank you for watching this week's episode. I really appreciate it. Much love, and let's get started.